The Exile's dawn. Commander Sarah Chen watched the transport ship disappear into Nexus 7's violet sky, leaving her alone on a world that had claimed the lives of every previous visitor. The Galactic Council's sentence still rang in her ears. For the crime of violating non-intervention protocols and endangering the stability of regulated space, you are hereby exiled to Nexus 7. She allowed herself a bitter smile. They'd chosen this death world carefully, a planet where the very air could crystallize in your lungs during the free cycles, where the indigenous life forms defied classification, and where every previous attempt at settlement had ended in disaster. The Council expected her to die, erasing their embarrassment at her defiance of their precious protocols. The memory of her crime strengthened her resolve. 3 weeks ago, she discovered that a stellar anomaly would destroy several human colonies in the Outer Rim. The Council had deemed them too primitive for evacuation, citing their lack of faster-than-light travel. So Sarah had taken her research vessel, the Starbridge, and warned them anyway. 10,000 lives saved, and her career destroyed. The survival pack they'd given her was a joke. Standard rations for a week, a basic filter mask, and a locator beacon that she knew would never work. She'd studied enough Council exile cases to know they always sabotaged the beacons. They preferred clean endings to their problems. A distant screech drew her attention to the crystalline forest ahead. The trees weren't really trees. They were silicon-based life forms that grew in fractal patterns, their branches splitting into perfect geometric shapes. In the dying light, they seemed to pulse with internal energy. Sarah activated her filter mask and began walking. She needed shelter before nightfall when the freeze cycle would begin. Her research on Nexus 7 had been theoretical, part of her xenobiology studies at the Academy, but now those lectures might mean the difference between survival and death. The ground crunched beneath her boots, a carpet of crystalline fragments that chimed with each step. Another screech, closer this time, followed by a sound like wind chimes in a storm. She quickened her pace, eyes scanning for anything resembling a cave or overhang. The first crystal shard shot past her head without warning, embedding itself in a nearby tree crystal with a resonant ping. Sarah dove behind a larger formation as more shards filled the air. Through gaps in her cover, she glimpsed her attacker, a creature like a floating collection of crystal needles, rotating in complex patterns as it launched its weapons. A resonator, she whispered, remembering her studies. The creatures were thought to be colony organisms, each crystal shard containing part of a distributed consciousness. They communicated through vibrations, using their crystalline bodies to transmit and receive complex frequencies. As if responding to her thoughts, the resonator's attack pattern changed. The sound of its movements shifted from chaotic to rhythmic, almost musical. Sarah felt a strange pressure in her head, like standing too close to a speaker at a concert. Without conscious decision, she began humming, a low, steady tone that matched the creature's frequency. The pressure in her head intensified, then transformed into something else entirely. Images flooded her mind. Light patterns, vibration matrices, the complex dance of crystal growth. The resonator stopped attacking. It hovered closer, its crystal components rotating more slowly. Sarah maintained her hum, instinctively modulating it, as she began to understand the patterns. She was communicating with it, not through words but through resonance itself. More resonators emerged from the forest, drawn by the exchange. Instead of attacking, they joined the symphony, creating a complex harmonic web that Sarah could somehow see in her mind. Through this connection, she began to understand their neural architecture, not silicon computers as xenobiologists had theorized, but crystalline matrices capable of storing and processing information through vibration. When the first freeze cycle hit an hour later, Sarah wasn't huddled in a cave. She was surrounded by a protective formation of resonators, their crystalline bodies arranged to channel the deadly cold away from her. They had accepted her into their network, recognizing her ability to share their song. As the temperature plummeted and the air itself began to crystallize, Sarah smiled. The Council had sent her here to die, but they had inadvertently given her something far more valuable, a chance to evolve. She could feel her mind changing, expanding to accommodate the crystal song of her new allies. This wasn't an ending. It was a transformation. Through the long night, Sarah learned to extend her awareness through the resonators network. She discovered that the entire crystalline forest was interconnected, a vast communication system that spanned the planet. The resonators were like nodes in this network, mobile centers of consciousness that could relocate and reorganize as needed. By dawn, she had mapped nearly 10 square kilometers of territory in her mind. She could sense other life forms moving through the network, massive creatures that seemed to phase between crystal and energy, smaller entities that tended the forest's growth, and deep beneath the surface, something vast and ancient that pulsed with planetary rhythms. The Council had intended Nexus 7 to be her tomb. Instead, it had become the birthplace of something unprecedented, a human mind learning to sing in harmony with a crystalline world. As the first light of day sent rainbow refractions through her crystalline guardians, Sarah began planning. She was no longer just Commander Sarah Chen, the disgraced officer who had dared to save lives against orders. She was becoming something new, something that bridged the gap between organic and mineral consciousness. And when she was ready, the Council would learn that their punishment had created exactly what they feared most, a human who could prove that their rigid protocols were not just wrong, but dangerously limited. The crystal song hummed through her mind, and Sarah added her own harmony to the endless symphony of Nexus 7. The real work was just beginning. Neural Symphony. 3 months into her exile, Sarah Chen stood at the entrance of what she now called the Resonance Chamber, a vast crystalline cavern that served as both her home and laboratory. The walls pulsed with living light, each crystal formation carefully grown and tuned to extend her connection to Nexus 7's neural network. She pressed her hand against a central crystal pillar, closing her eyes as information flowed through her consciousness. The network had grown far beyond her initial connections with the resonators. Now she could sense activity across hundreds of kilometers, from the deep crystal forests to the plasma geysers of the western wastes. A disturbance rippled through the network, something massive moving through the northern territories. Sarah focused her attention there, extending her awareness through chains of crystalline nodes. The image crystallized in her mind. A shadow walker, one of the enormous entities that phase-shifted between material and energy states. "Show me," she whispered, and the crystal matrices around her hummed in response. The cavern filled with a 3-dimensional projection of the creature, a towering form nearly 30 meters high, its body a constantly shifting lattice of dark energy and crystalline matter. 6 points of white light marked what might be called its face, though the creature's true sensory apparatus was far more complex. Sarah had been studying the shadow walkers for weeks, fascinated by their quantum nature. They existed simultaneously in multiple states, their consciousness seemingly spread across different dimensions. Until now, they had ignored her attempts at communication, perhaps viewing her organic mind as too limited for meaningful interaction. But Sarah wasn't purely organic anymore. The constant interface with the crystal network had changed her neural patterns, creating new pathways that allowed her to process multidimensional information. She could feel the transformation continuing, her consciousness expanding to accommodate increasingly complex forms of awareness. She began the interaction sequence she'd designed, using the resonance chamber to generate precisely calibrated frequencies. The chamber itself was an instrument, each crystal surface tuned to carry specific harmonic patterns. The shadow walker stopped its movement, its form fluctuating more rapidly as it registered the signal. Sarah added layers to the symphony, incorporating what she'd learned about quantum harmonics from her resonator allies. The shadow walker's response came not in sounds or images, but in waves of probability, potential futures and parallel presents overlapping in her mind. "That's it," she breathed, adjusting the resonance patterns to match the creature's quantum state. "Show me how you see the world." The connection, when it formed, was overwhelming. Sarah's consciousness expanded across multiple dimensions, experiencing reality through the Shadow Walker's unified perception. She saw time as a crystal lattice, each moment a node in an infinite network. Space folded and unfolded like origami, revealing shortcuts through reality that the creature used for its phase-shifting movements. More importantly, she understood why the Shadow Walkers had seemed so aloof. They weren't ignoring her. They existed in a state of universal connection, aware of all possibilities simultaneously. The concept of individual communication was foreign to them. They were already one with everything, including her. Through this new understanding, Sarah began to grasp the true nature of Nexus 7. The planet wasn't just a death world. It was a living computer of unprecedented complexity. The crystalline forests were its processors, the resonators its mobile data nodes, and the Shadow Walkers its quantum coprocessors. Everything was connected in a vast computational symphony. As she withdrew from the connection, careful to step down through the dimensional layers gradually, Sarah noticed something had changed in her resonance chamber. The crystals had rearranged themselves, growing into new configurations that mimicked the quantum patterns she'd experienced. The chamber was learning, adapting to accommodate higher orders of consciousness. A chime-like sound drew her attention to the chamber's entrance. A group of resonators had arrived, their crystalline forms more elaborate than she'd ever seen. They had evolved, just as she had, through their continued interaction. Through their harmonic link, she understood their purpose. They were ready to help her take the next step. Sarah smiled as she realized what this meant. She wasn't just adapting to survive on Nexus 7. She was becoming part of its evolution. The planet itself was using her as a bridge between organic and quantum consciousness, creating something entirely new in the process. The resonators began to arrange themselves in a complex geometric pattern around her. Sarah recognized it as a higher dimensional structure, similar to how the Shadow Walkers organized their quantum states. They were offering to help her transcend her purely physical form, to become something that could exist across multiple states of reality. As she stepped into the center of their formation, Sarah thought about the Galactic Council and their rigid categories of life and intelligence. They had exiled her for believing in the worth of primitive human colonies, unable to see beyond their hierarchical view of existence. Now she was learning that consciousness itself was far more diverse and interconnected than they had imagined. The transformation began with a song, not sound waves through air, but pure resonance through the quantum fabric of reality. Sarah felt her consciousness expand again, reaching out through the crystalline network to touch minds both ancient and new. The Shadow Walkers acknowledged her emergence, accepting her into their quantum dance. In that moment, Commander Sarah Chen ceased to be merely human. She became a nexus point between worlds, a consciousness that could bridge the gap between organic thought and quantum reality. The Council had meant to isolate her, but instead, they had catalyzed an evolutionary leap that would change the galaxy's understanding of life itself. As the last light of day scattered through the crystal forests, Sarah began composing a new symphony, one that would eventually reach beyond Nexus 7 to touch all forms of consciousness, whether organic, crystalline, or quantum. The music of existence had gained a new voice, and the universe would never be quite the same. The coming storm. The Galactic Council chamber had lost its air of pompous certainty. Emergency lights cast a red glow across the assembled representatives as they watched the latest footage from the outer colonies. On the main display, a Corthan warship, a massive construct of dark metal and pulsing energy fields, methodically destroyed another human settlement. That makes 17 colonies in the past month, Admiral Helena Drake said, her hologram flickering as she reported from the front lines. The Corthans aren't just attacking, they're harvesting. Their ships are absorbing our technology, adapting it, and becoming stronger with each engagement. Councillor Ven, who had once voted to exile Sarah Chen, leaned forward in his crystalline seat. What of our latest defensive systems? Useless, Helena replied. The Corthans adapt within minutes. We need something they can't analyze and copy, something completely different from our conventional technology. She paused, her holographic eyes scanning the chamber. "We need Commander Chen." The chamber erupted in protests. Counselor Ven raised a hand for silence. Commander Chen was exiled for good reason, and even if we wanted to recall her, Nexus 7 is a death world. The probability of her survival is 100%. Helena interrupted, triggering a new hologram. "Our long-range sensors detected this 3 days ago." The image showed Nexus 7's surface, but not as anyone remembered it. Massive crystalline structures rose from the planet's crust, forming patterns that defied conventional geometry. Shadow walkers moved through these structures like living shadows, while swarms of resonators created ever-shifting networks of light and energy. "This is impossible," someone whispered. "The native species never displayed this level of organization." "They didn't," Helena agreed, "until Commander Chen arrived. Whatever she's done there, she's transformed the entire planet into something our scientists can't even classify. And more importantly," she gestured, and the image shifted to show a Korthan scout ship attempting to scan the planet. The Korthans can't analyze it either. In her resonance chamber on Nexus 7, Sarah Chen observed the Council's debate through the quantum network she had built. The Shadow Walker's ability to perceive multiple realities allowed her to witness events light years away, though choosing which reality was actual remained challenging. She felt the approach of her closest ally, a Shadow Walker she called Echo, its quantum field harmonizing with her expanded consciousness. Through their connection, she shared her observations of the Council and the Korthan threat. Echo's response came in waves of probability, showing her countless possible futures. In most of them, the Korthan's technological absorption would eventually lead to the destruction of all independent life in the galaxy. Their drive to consume and adapt technology was unlimited, and conventional resistance only made them stronger. But there were other possibilities. Futures where something completely alien to their understanding disrupted their progression. Sarah saw herself in these futures, leading armies of quantum crystalline beings against the Korthan fleets. The Shadow Walkers and Resonators of Nexus 7 had evolved far beyond what any Council scientist could comprehend, becoming entities that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensions. "They're coming," she said aloud, her voice creating ripples through the crystalline network. "Not just the Council, but the Korthans too. They'll detect the energy signatures of our quantum network eventually." The resonators around her chimed in harmony, their crystalline forms pulsing with accumulated knowledge. Over the past months, they had served as her memory banks, storing everything she knew about Council technology, combat tactics, and fleet operations. Combined with their own evolving intelligence, they had developed entirely new strategies for warfare across dimensional boundaries. Sarah stood, her form shimming slightly as her consciousness expanded into quantum states. She was no longer just a bridge between organic and crystalline life. She had become something entirely new. Her body remained human, but her mind existed across multiple dimensions, able to process information and make decisions in ways her former self couldn't have imagined. Through the quantum network, she issued a call to all of Nexus 7's sentient species. The response was immediate. Shadow Walkers emerged from their quantum states, resonators assembled into complex battle formations, and deep beneath the surface, ancient crystalline entities awakened from their mineral sleep. "The Council thinks they're coming to rescue me," Sarah communicated through the network. "The Korthans think they're coming to analyze and absorb a new form of technology. They're both wrong." She smiled as her consciousness expanded further, touching every crystalline node on the planet. "They're coming to witness an evolution." Echo showed her another probability stream, a future where the combined consciousness of Nexus 7's quantum network spread throughout the galaxy, offering a new path of evolution for all species, not through technological advancement or biological adaptation, but through the transcendence of consciousness itself. As if in response to her thoughts, the crystal forests began to sing. It was a song of preparation, of transformation, of possibility. The Council had exiled her to this death world thinking it would be her end. Instead, it had become the birthplace of a new form of existence, one that might save not just humanity, but all life in the galaxy. Sarah Chen, once a disgraced commander, now stood as the nexus of a planetary consciousness. The storm was coming, bringing both threat and opportunity. And she would meet it not as a lone exile, but as the orchestrator of a quantum symphony that would reshape the very nature of reality. Symphony of War. The Corthan fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metallic predators, their ships' adaptive hulls already shifting to analyze the quantum anomalies radiating from Nexus 7. Behind them, maintaining a cautious distance, the Council's diplomatic vessel carried Admiral Helena Drake and a delegation of scientists desperate to understand what their exile had become. Sarah observed their arrival through a million crystalline eyes, her consciousness spread across the quantum network she had built. The resonators had arranged themselves in complex geometric patterns around the planet, creating a multi-dimensional defense grid that existed partially out of phase with normal spacetime. "They're scanning us," she communicated to her allies, feeling the Corthan's prodding technologies wash over the planet's surface. "Let them see exactly what we want them to see." The crystalline network responded instantly, shifting its quantum states to present a deliberately incomplete picture of their capabilities. The Corthan ships took the bait, their adaptive hulls reconfiguring to match what they thought they were seeing. Admiral Drake's voice crackled through conventional communications. "Commander Chen." "Sarah, we've come to." "I know why you're here," Sarah interrupted. Her voice carried through crystalline resonance rather than radio waves. "But you'll have to wait. We have other guests to attend to first." As if on cue, the Corthan fleet launched its first attack. Energy beams designed to disrupt conventional shields lanced toward the planet, only to pass through empty space as the entire defensive grid shifted between quantum states, becoming momentarily intangible. Sarah smiled. "Now let's show them something they can't adapt to." "Echo, begin the symphony." The Shadow Walker acknowledged, its quantum field expanding to encompass dozens of Corthan vessels. Within that field, reality itself became fluid, operating according to rules the Corthan's technology couldn't comprehend. Their adaptive hulls tried desperately to match the changing conditions, but how do you adapt to being in multiple states of existence simultaneously? The resonators moved next, their crystalline forms accelerating through dimensional shortcuts that Sarah had learned to navigate. They emerged inside the Corthan ships, their very presence disrupting the advanced technology that made those vessels so formidable. The Corthans had built their empire on the ability to analyze and adapt to any technology they encountered, but the quantum crystalline beings of Nexus 7 weren't technology at all. "Impossible," one of the Council scientists whispered, watching as the mighty Corthan fleet found itself entangled in a battle it couldn't understand, let alone win. "Their ships are just coming apart." Sarah extended her consciousness through the quantum network, touching the minds of the Corthan crews. She felt their confusion, their fear as they confronted something that defied their fundamental understanding of reality. Their entire civilization was built on the assumption that any technology could be analyzed and replicated, but consciousness itself, that was something they had never considered as a weapon. "Your adaptive technology is remarkable," she broadcast to the Corthan commanders, her thoughts carried through crystalline resonance. "But you've reached its limits. There are aspects of existence that can't be replicated through technology alone." The Corthan response came in the form of a massive energy surge as their flagship attempted to absorb and adapt to the quantum phenomena around it. Sarah had anticipated this. It was the Corthan way, after all. Through the network, she directed Echo and a group of Shadow Walkers to surround the flagship. What happened next defied conventional physics. The Shadow Walkers existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously, and as they synchronized their fields, they created a space where probability itself became a weapon. The Corthan flagship found itself existing in all possible states of failure at once. Its systems adapted to one possibility only to be undone by another. "Admiral Drake," Sarah called through the crystalline network. I believe now would be a good time for that diplomatic discussion you wanted to have." The Admiral's response was delayed, likely due to her trying to process what she was witnessing. "Yes, yes, of course. But Sarah, what exactly have you become?" The question echoed through the quantum network, drawing responses from countless crystalline minds. Sarah felt their collective consciousness merging with her own, offering perspectives that transcended simple categories of existence. "I've become what humanity could be," she answered finally, not bound by physical form or limited to a single state of being. "The Council exiled me thinking Nexus 7 would be my death sentence. Instead, it showed me that consciousness itself is the final frontier." As if to emphasize her point, the crystalline structures across Nexus 7's surface began to shift, forming new configurations that stretched across multiple dimensions. The remaining Corthan ships found themselves ensnared in quantum fields that rendered their adaptive technology meaningless. "Your civilization faces a choice," Sarah continued, addressing both the Council delegation and the Corthan commanders. "You can continue pursuing power through technology alone, or you can evolve. The quantum network we've built here isn't just a weapon, it's a path to transcendence." The resonators around her hummed in harmony, their crystalline forms pulsing with possibilities. Through their network, Sarah could sense the impact her words were having on both sides. The Council scientists were already theorizing about the implications of consciousness-based quantum technology, while the Corthans were experiencing something entirely new, doubt in their technological supremacy. The symphony of war was ending, but a new composition was just beginning, one that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be alive, to be conscious, to be evolving. Sarah Chen, the exile who had become a bridge between realities, prepared to show them all the true meaning of transcendence. Evolution's echo. 3 months after the Battle of Nexus 7, the planet's crystalline spires had become a symbol of hope across the galaxy. Representatives from 100 worlds gathered in the Great Resonance Chamber, their forms ranging from organic to synthetic, all here to witness something unprecedented. Sarah Chen stood at the center of the chamber, her form flickering between physical and quantum states as she addressed the assembled delegates. The Shadow Walkers moved like living shadows among the crowds, while resonators created intricate patterns of light and energy throughout the space. "When the Council exiled me here," she began, her voice carried through crystalline harmonics, "they thought they were upholding order. Instead, they revealed that their understanding of order itself was limited. The universe isn't a hierarchy of species and technologies. It's a symphony of consciousness, each form of existence adding its own unique resonance to the greater whole." Behind her, the quantum network pulsed with accumulated knowledge. The Corthan ships that had survived the battle now orbited Nexus 7 peacefully, their crews learning to extend their consciousness beyond mere technological adaptation. The Council's scientists worked alongside them, discovering that the boundaries between organic thought, technological processing, and quantum awareness were far more permeable than anyone had imagined. "The threat we faced wasn't just the Corthans' drive to consume technology," Sarah continued, her consciousness touching each mind in the chamber. "It was our collective failure to understand that evolution isn't a linear progression from primitive to advanced. It's an expansion of awareness, a growth of consciousness itself." Through the quantum network, she shared images of what was already happening across the galaxy. On a dozen worlds, crystalline growths had begun to emerge, responding to the quantum frequencies emanating from Nexus 7. The planet's transformation wasn't an isolated event. It was the first note in a galaxy-wide symphony of evolution. Echo, her Shadow Walker ally, shifted through quantum states beside her, its presence a reminder of how far understanding could grow when minds remained open to new possibilities. Through their deep connection, Sarah could perceive the intricate web of probability and potential that bound all consciousness together. The Corthans sought to evolve through technological absorption. She gestured to their representatives. The Council sought to maintain order through rigid protocols. Her gaze swept across the chamber. "But true evolution requires us to transcend our limitations, not just reinforce them. As if in response, the crystalline structures throughout the chamber began to resonate at new frequencies. The assembled delegates gasped as they felt their consciousness expand, temporarily touching the quantum awareness that Sarah had discovered. It was a glimpse of what was possible, a future where consciousness itself became the bridge between all forms of existence. I stand before you not as an exile, not as a commander, but as proof that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our determination. It's our ability to adapt, to grow, to transcend our own definitions of what's possible. Sarah's form shifted fully into quantum state, her consciousness extending through the network. And we're not alone in this potential. The resonators around her began to sing, their crystalline forms generating harmonics that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Through the quantum network, Sarah could feel minds awakening across the galaxy, responding to frequencies that had always existed but had never been heard before. This is the true purpose of Nexus 7, she revealed. Not a death world, but a catalyst for transformation. The crystalline consciousness that evolved here isn't meant to remain isolated. It's meant to spread, to offer every species a chance to expand beyond their current limitations. Admiral Drake stepped forward, her expression one of wonder and realization. The Council's greatest fear was always chaos, the breakdown of order. But this is a new kind of order, isn't it? Sarah nodded, her quantum form rippling with possibilities. An order based on harmony rather than hierarchy. The Corthans sought to consume and adapt technology. We're offering something far more powerful, the ability to evolve consciousness itself. Through the quantum network, she shared visions of the future, a galaxy where consciousness flowed freely between organic, synthetic, and quantum states, where technology served as a tool for awareness rather than a measure of superiority, where the boundaries between species dissolved not through conquest or assimilation, but through shared evolution. The symphony has begun, Sarah declared, her voice resonating through multiple dimensions. The question isn't whether to join it, but how each of us will contribute to its harmony. As if in response, the crystalline structures of Nexus 7 began to pulse with new energy. The quantum network expanded, touching minds across the galaxy, offering a choice that would reshape the very nature of existence. The exile had become the architect of evolution. The death world had become a cradle of transformation, and the symphony of consciousness was only beginning its eternal song. In that moment, as representatives from across the galaxy felt their awareness expand through the quantum network, Sarah Chen smiled. The Council had sent her to Nexus 7 expecting her to die. Instead, she had discovered that death and life, like all apparent opposites, were simply different notes in the universal symphony of existence. The next movement was about to begin, and its music would echo through eternity.